prophesied about this man. He wanted to wipe out the Jews. And he succeeded until he got to a very small village. What he would do is, he knows the Jews' temple, you shouldn't bring a pig in. He will go into their temple and kill a pig. He did terrible things. He got to this very small village. There was this man called Maccabeus. He called his children. And he said, we will not let this man defile our God. So he and his children and a couple of young men in the village, they ran into the bush. And they fought the army of Judas, of Antiochus. And they won. All of a sudden, Maccabeus died. His son, Judas Maccabeus, took over. And he perfected how to fight guerrilla warfare with his army. This man with a ragtag army held a whole army of Rome captive. That is the beginning, that is the historical beginning of the Pharisees. But 200 years by the time Jesus was born, the Pharisees had become just a religious organization. They did not have any life. In fact, the people that gave Jesus the most problems were the Pharisees. That is why Jesus told them in Mark 7. He says, you have abandoned the teachings of God. You have held on to the traditions of men. 9 years ago, God specifically told me to resign my job and go into full-time ministry. My mandate was very clear. Christian marriages. And in those years, God told me, don't ask anybody if you can come. I am going to open doors for you. I cannot explain this to you. Because I cannot, honestly, I don't understand it. God has opened doors for me in every continent of this world. He has exposed me to different cultures. And it is amazing how different cultures relate what the culture is. The culture in America is different from the culture in Europe. The culture in Africa or West Africa is different from the culture in North Africa. The culture in India is different from the culture in Guatemala. And some of these things that I've seen in these places are amazing to me. I've discovered one thing. Culture changes. Every places or everywhere that I have been, what they do now is not what they did 50 years ago.
What
they did 50 years ago was not what they did 100 years ago. Technology has even transformed everything. But there's one thing that remains the same. In every single culture that I have been to, one thing remains the same. Hebrews 13:8. Jesus the same yesterday, today and forever. The word of God never changes. Whether you live in Africa or you live in Guatemala, or you live in Sydney, Australia, or you live in Omaha, Nebraska, the word of God is the same. Especially when it comes to our marriage. It is time for us to start to see which one is culture and which one is the word of God. When our culture clashes with the word of God, I am hoping and I am praying that everyone under the sound of my voice will choose the Bible over a culture. Remember, this is the same thing God warned the Pharisees about. In 2003, I started to travel a lot among Africans. And I started to see a pattern that disturbed me. As a social scientist, I did a study. And that study came out in terms of what influences African marriage. And I wrote a book about it. I'm going to share what it is right now and pray that God will help us see it. Please understand that this is not, we're not putting down one culture or another. I live in America, and when I'm there, I fight that culture there. See, in America, we have something we call it political correctness. Some things you say, something you don't say. But I am one of those who will say whatever is on my mind. But tonight we're talking to each other as families. So this is a family meeting. Not only of Africans, but of the people of God. Two things influence Africans greatly. When I say Africans, I mean Africa south of the Sahara. From Mali